This is Build It Baby, the show for big ideas, brave pivots, and bold next chapters. So let's do it. Let's build it, baby. Welcome to Build It Baby. I'm Penelope Bent, and today's conversation is so rich that we're bringing it to you in two parts. In part one, we're diving into why so many high-achieving people feel stuck, even when everything looks successful on the outside, and what it really means to start hearing your own voice again. Joining me today is my friend and the sage of coaching, Courtney Anderson, a life coach who helps people navigate change, reclaim clarity, and the daily and defining decisions that shape their lives. I have so been looking forward to this conversation, so let's build it, baby. Welcome, my friend. Thank you so much for joining me on Build It Baby. I'm so thrilled to have you today. Thanks so much, Courtney.
Well, Penelope, thank you so much. I've been looking forward to our conversation too, genuinely. I love the premise of Build It Baby because in my world, the most important construction is happening on the inside. And that's the internal foundation that actually makes external success possible. And I'm honored to be here and dig into this with you. So thank you for having me.
Well, I knew that you would be the perfect guest. So let's begin with the origin of the story. What originally led you into the a life of coaching?
Well, what led me here is what leads most people to the work that they actually, that actually fits them. It started with a longing and then a detour. And I work with a lot of high achieving professionals who are accomplished and by every external measure and internal measure, professionally and personally. And yet there's something off. There's just something like, they're running a race that they forgot to ask themselves, like, if they even wanted to run it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm able to sit with them in that space because that's the space I came from. And I go way back here because I was raised in a family system that valued achievement, valued doing.
Right.
Busyness was your proof of worth. Hell, I was working at the age of 9 making money. And the concept of being, just being present and, still enough, being enough, that was not in a value that was instilled in me, and nor was it anything nurtured.
Mm-hmm.
So I spent decades not even realizing I was operating from that blueprint, excuse me. And I actually wanted to study psychology back in the day. And I was told by my parents that, hey, no dice, absolutely not. You're not going to make any money at that.
Wow.
Yeah. And, the psychology field was very different back then, but basically, forbidden. So I filed that away and, like we all do with things that are more true to us. And I went off in a different direction. And I was extremely successful because if you remember, that was the currency of my family, right? Is achievement. And it took me until my late 30s, early 40s, and a massive family tragedy to actually stop and find out a little bit about who I was underneath all of the doing and busyness. And, those questions led me to some therapy and studying Eastern and Western modalities of being. And, coaching wasn't a thing back then, but it did start to open the door to that.
Right, exactly. Was there a moment when you realized that this was the work you were meant to do?
I wouldn't say there was a particular moment. The pull was always there.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a couple of false starts when my kids were a little bit older and in school themselves, I had this notion that I'll go to school too. And I would, I started to get my master's in holistic psychotherapy. So again, along the lines of what I wanted to study when I was younger. And and then family took me away from being able to complete that. And volunteering and community service is a huge part of our core value family system. And so I did a lot of volunteer work while I was raising the kids. And I kept noticing that, I was always the one that was asking the question underneath the question, if
Yeah.
you will.
Hmm.
Like, not what happened, but what does that mean to you? And not necessarily what are you going to do, but what do you actually want? And those deeper type questions. So fast forward when I started the coaching certification program, someone in one of my life basically said, "Oh gosh, this is what you've always been doing." So it really wasn't a aha thing.
Well, it is a great fit as one of your dearest friends. You are definitely a great question gal.
Well, thank
We've
you.
I've really enjoyed, and you certainly nailed me with a few good questions. So they were pivotal in my experience. Was there a moment in your life when someone helped you see something you couldn't see on your own? Did you have that experience? Was that part of what kind of laid in to your journey?
I wouldn't say, again, there was a single moment more of an uncovering.
Mm-hmm.
For a long time, I thought I was choosing my life. And in some ways, I was, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if I had to be completely honest, a lot of my choices weren't really choices. They were fear based responses.
There were
Um,
reactions.
and they were based in fear.
Yeah.
Like, for example, I took my first job out of college because I didn't want to move back to the East Coast. That was it. Not because it lit me up, not because it was aligned with who I was becoming, but it kept me from something uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that was the grip of my controlling parents.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I was good at what I did because, again, family currency was achievement. And I also had to be exceptional because the alternative was I had to go back home, which I
And that was a definite hell no.
it didn't. Yeah, hell no. Yes, yes. So in that search, that's the thing about making like fear-based decisions um, that aren't in alignment. They can be remarkably good at masquerading as agency. Right? I
Hmm.
looked busy. I was busy by every outside measure. I was extremely successful, making a lot of money. But underneath, when you take the time to look, which back then I certainly didn't take the time to look,
Right.
there was a sort of low grade resignation. Like, this is life. Like, this is what life is supposed to be. So, my turning point and what shifted for me was like two kind of parts. The first was my husband and I both had very demanding jobs. We were about to have our second child, and we decided one of us would stay home with the kids.
Hmm.
So I stepped out of the workforce. And you would think that would do it, right? Change of routine and pace and what have you. But it didn't because I took on contract work to keep my head in the game. And so, fast forward several years, and this family tragedy hits that just flattened me. And really, that was the turning point. And along the way, along that path of me finding really the path back to myself for the first time in my life, there were a lot of angels that helped, that sat with me, not to fix me, not to advise me, not,
Right.
but just to witness and reflect and wait while I found my own answers. And that's the service I strive to provide my clients in the work that I do. And I find in their transformational moments, it's not always a thunderbolt. Sometimes it's a pause, or sometimes it's just that question said the exact right way that gives them, you know what I'm talking
Yeah,
about? That kind
when
of
you go,
gives
oh,
them,
it's the aha moment.
yes,
Mm-hmm,
yes,
mm-hmm.
that moment when, you hold enough space for someone to hear, their true voice and the inner wisdom that, as I've heard you say in many of your podcasts, that's already there,
Exactly.
and yeah,
They're
that you're
finally
just uncovering.
discovering. Mm-hmm.
Exactly, exactly. Yeah. So, I'm curious, Penelope, with all the people that you work with, do you find that with the the people that, is that a common thread among the builders that you work with?
I think it's well, what I find so fascinating about working with, entrepreneurs, that everyone is so, we're all creators, so we're all so very, very different. But I do find it interesting. And these are very, very intelligent individuals. They've been very successful, perhaps in their executive work, but have decided they want to make a move and open a business. And it's really fascinating to listen to people be so. It's such you can present such a simple question, and there's that moment when I don't know. I've read years ago, sometimes it's just the way someone says it. You may
Hmm.
have heard it a billion times before, but your energy is the one that kind of just taps that door open. And it's when that light goes on and they're able to really connect the dots. It was there all along. So I think that's really, it's so exciting to be able to be that conduit
Yes.
to help people find their voice and to feel safe. When you work with people, you work with so many people, I'm sure, that want to change. Why do you think people stay stuck so long?
Uh,
I mean, this is something I ask
there,
myself all the time. Why?
and
Why are you not
yes.
just, pull the trigger and let's do this?
Yeah, that's a really good question, and there are probably more answers than we have time for.
Right.
I could probably give you my top three. The first one I'll give you just from my own personal experience. In my life for a really long time, nothing looked like it was wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So, in some respect, what are you going to fix? And wasn't and also because achievement and it was a currency in my family, the perfectionism and the overworking traits that I took on, I thought those were honorable personality traits. Well, in fact, they were really survival strategies that I learned early on to be safe, to feel love, and to feel acceptance, to avoid criticism, to avoid shame in my family system. I took on those, it was a safety mechanism.
Right, right. I find it amazing in our culture today that we see these, what we think are these perfect pictures. It's the perfect family, everyone's beautiful, everyone is successful financially, they have a beautiful home, they have all the amenities. And yet, when you really take a deeper dive into the humans and the elements and the deeper piece of our own individual humanity, there is so much craving for another path, for
Yes.
a deeper understanding, for work that they're passionate about every day. For like
Yeah.
I always say, I never feel like I've ever worked a day in my life because I love what I
Hmm.
do. And I think for me, because I was so young when I went into business, I was too young to really be afraid because I didn't know, how dangerous this could have, I could have thought this was. So
Right.
in that respect, I was wonderfully naive and everything was golden. And that was a beautiful time for me to begin. But
Right.
I think that you do believe that things are perfect. I think it's very difficult for people when everyone else looks at their world and just, oh, you're so successful, you're doing so well, you have
Yeah.
things that are so perfect. It's very difficult for especially women, I believe, to say, no,
Yeah.
actually things are pretty fucked up.
Yes.
But they can't really say that because culturally it looks really good.
Absolutely. I mean, the culture supported everything I was doing,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it applauded me.
Mm-hmm.
Work longer hours, make more money, rise the corporate, jump up in the corporate ladder. I was being applauded for, but inside, I mean,
You
it
were
was
dying.
exhausting.
Right.
It was exhausting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And when you're ready to take your last breath, there's nothing worse than me thinking that, anyone here on the planet would say to themselves, gosh, why didn't I make that change? Why did I stay tethered for so long? Why didn't I fly?
Yes.
And that's what I'm really hoping that, and I know the work that you're doing and the work that I'm doing, I hope that that's some of the difference that we make out there.
I agree.
I know that there's so many things about coaching that, there's so many myths about coaching. What do most people misunderstand about the idea of having someone help them during their growth patches or their difficult times throughout their life? What is one of the most misunderstood conceptions or interpretations of coaching?
Well, I think one of the biggest ones is that, the coach has the answers, right?
Mm,
People sometimes come in and they're looking for someone to tell them what to do. And I understand that impulse completely. When you're in the middle of something super difficult and the fastest relief is for somebody just to give you the answer,
right.
right? Um, but that doesn't create the lasting change. Because if I hand you my answer, Courtney's answer, you're still dependent on something outside of you,
Mm-hmm.
outside of yourself, right? So the goal of coaching, at least in my practice, is to help you develop your own capacity to hear yourself, to trust yourself, to make decisions from a grounded and centered place,
Mm-hmm.
rather than fear, like I did when I was younger,
Right.
rather than habit, or even the supposed to, what you think you should do, right?
Oh, that's the worst.
Um, it is. And then, another kind of probably secondary, I mean, there's other misconceptions, but another misconception is that coaching is therapy. And there is an overlap in the two fields. But coaching is generally not looking backward like therapy does,
Right.
to heal wounds. In therapy, you're healing wounds. Coaching is working with who you are now and who you want to become.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think there's a little bit of misconception there. And the last one I'll mention, which was a little bit hard for me actually, is there's this unspoken rule that, you know, asking for help and needing support is a sign of weakness.
I know.
That if you are a capable person, you should be able to figure it out on your own. And that one hits hard for me because it went completely against my family operating system of you don't tell anybody your business. And if you have problems, I don't know if you can relate to this, but you figure it out on your own.
Mm-hmm.
At one point in my life when I was in therapy, I didn't tell my mom because I knew I would be considered damaged goods. And I just,
Well, one of the things I find amazing about people having issues with asking for help. I'm a big believer. Well, I think part of it is that the type of work when you're working with, a large group of women on these big photo layouts, you're always you're asking the makeup artist, or you're asking someone, hey, what do you think, this set looks, how's it look? How's the gown look on her? So you're so used to involving so many people in the decision making, but very few people have that experience in their lifetime. And I think what happens at childhood, and I was just reading a great article. Actually, the gal that wrote the book, I know that you know her well, the one on the fixed mindset and the
Oh, yes, Carol Dweck.
and the growth
Yes,
mindset. Yeah,
Yes, Carol
her
Dweck.
book's
Yes.
great. But I thought what was interesting is, and this really caught me by surprise, is that as parents and as our children are being raised, and I remember this with my daughter, because she was such a smart, just smart as a whip. And I would say to her, because I thought I was really encouraging, you're so smart. That's such a, you've done such a terrific job. And after I've read the book, my better choice would have been to say to her, good work. You've
Praise
done
the
a
effort.
good job learning, so the difference was that I believe that you're so smart. When you're told that when you're young, then those folks believe that they have to know it all. So they don't step out, because, well, how can we? I mean, I was told I was smart, but that's just going to show that I'm not smart.
That's
so
right.
I didn't nurture the growth mindset. I didn't know anything about that. I thought I was just being a great, my family, the woman was supposed to stay home, keep your mouth shut and take care of the kids. And so I never, received, and the whole story as far as family is concerned, no support there.
Right.
For a female. If you're a male, you could own the castle, but a female, you're stupid. So I think that is such a huge issue with individuals today, because they believe that, well, I should know that. So if I ask for help, if I even show that I do not have all of the answers, then that means that they're going to find out that I really am not very smart at all. And that makes me very sad, because especially in today's world, things are so complex. And the smartest thing professionals and builders, whether it's your business career or life, can do today is to find that mentor, that coach, that person that you align with, and work with them, because they can get to their goal a lot faster than thinking they're going to be able to do it all on their own. There's just no way that you can, I don't know, unless you're, some kind of a, some brilliance that I don't know anything about. Yeah. What's the biggest shift you see in people when coaching really starts to work for them?
The biggest shift, let's see. I would say the biggest shift I see is a change in the relationship to one's own voice.
Mm-hmm.
People come in and they have answers from everywhere except inside themselves. They've polled everybody.
Right.
They've read everything. Instagram this, TikTok that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they're waiting to be certain before they make a move.
Mm-hmm.
And I would say at some point in the work, there's a moment where they stop and say, I know what I want to do. I just need to decide if I'm willing to do it.
Yes. As you just heard, there comes a moment when you realize you already know what you want. You just have to decide if you're willing to act on it. And that's exactly where we're picking up in part 2. I'll see you there. Always best, P. Build It Baby is a Rainy Day Production House original. Hosted by Penelope Bent and produced and edited by Morgan Clymer. Music by Yuri Shemshashen and Oleksiy Holobiev. If this episode spoke to you, please follow the show and leave a review. It helps more dreamers like you find us. And remember, you're not just building a bold business or a career, you're building a bold life.